In the summer of 2025, as the world continued to grapple with various health challenges, a new crisis emerged in China's Guangdong province that would trigger some of the most extreme public health measures seen since the COVID-19 pandemic. This time, however, the enemy was not a respiratory virus, but a mosquito-borne disease called chikungunya that prompted authorities to implement what observers are calling a mosquito lockdown, a series of draconian measures that have drawn both praise for their comprehensiveness and criticism for their severity. When the first chikungunya cases appeared in Foshan, Guangdong province in June 2025, Chinese health authorities faced a familiar yet distinct challenge. Having experienced successive waves of dengue outbreaks in the same region for decades, they understood the explosive potential of Aedes mosquito-transmitted diseases. However, the rapid escalation from sporadic cases to over 7,000 confirmed infections within weeks triggered an unprecedented response that would make international headlines. The decision to implement extreme measures was not taken lightly. Chinese health officials, haunted by memories of how quickly COVID-19 had spread globally from their territory, were determined to prevent another pathogen from following a similar trajectory. The fact that chikungunya is transmitted by the same Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus mosquitoes that carry dengue, Zika and yellow fever made the situation particularly alarming. These diseases had already shown their pandemic potential in other parts of the world, and China was not prepared to become the next epicenter of a global arboviral outbreak. Authorities launched what they termed a patriotic public health campaign, a phrase that immediately evoked memories of China's zero-COVID policies. The campaign's messaging emphasized citizen duty and collective responsibility, framing mosquito control as a national security issue rather than merely a public health concern. Citizens were called upon to become soldiers in the war against mosquitoes, with neighborhood committees mobilized to ensure compliance with new regulations. The campaign's scope was breathtaking. Entire districts were effectively sealed off, not from human movement, but from mosquito activity. Teams of health workers, dressed in full protective gear reminiscent of COVID-19 response teams, descended upon affected neighborhoods with industrial-grade spraying equipment. The visual similarity to pandemic lockdown enforcement was striking, and intentional authorities wanted citizens to understand the gravity of the situation. Perhaps the most visually striking aspect of China's response was the mandatory spraying of individuals with insect repellent before allowing them entry into public buildings, shopping centres and workplaces. Videos circulating on social media showed long lines of people being systematically doused with chemical repellents by workers in hazmat suits. The procedure, while medically sound in principle, created scenes that many observers described as dystopian. Citizens were required to submit to this treatment multiple times daily if they needed to access essential services. Office buildings installed spraying stations at entrances, manned by trained personnel who would coat each person with repellent before scanning their health codes, a system repurposed from COVID-19 tracking. The psychological impact was significant, with many residents reporting feelings of dehumanization and anxiety about the chemicals being repeatedly applied to their bodies. The invasion of privacy reached new levels with the implementation of mandatory home inspections. Teams of health workers, accompanied by local security personnel, conducted door-to-door searches of every residence in affected areas. The ostensible purpose was to identify and eliminate potential mosquito breeding sites, any container holding stagnant water, no matter how small. These inspections were thorough and intrusive. Officials examined flower pots, air conditioning units, water storage containers, and even decorative fountains. Residents were required to be present during inspections and to demonstrate their understanding of proper water management techniques. Those found with violations faced immediate fines, and repeat offenders could face criminal charges. An escalation that shocked many residents who saw it as grossly disproportionate to the offence. The decision to make non-compliance a criminal offence represented a significant escalation in China's public health enforcement powers. Local courts established special fast-track procedures to process cases related to mosquito control violations. Penalties ranged from substantial fines, equivalent to several months' salary for average workers, to short-term detention for repeat offenders. The criminalization extended beyond simple water storage violations. Individuals who failed to report symptoms promptly, who provided false information during health screenings, or who interfered with spraying operations could face prosecution. This created an atmosphere of fear and hypervigilance in affected communities, with neighbors reporting each other for potential violations. The authorities deployed advanced surveillance technology, including drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras and chemical sensors. These drones patrolled neighborhoods continuously, identifying potential breeding sites and monitoring compliance with outdoor gathering restrictions. The sight of multiple drones circling overhead became a constant reminder of the state's omnipresent surveillance capabilities. More controversially, some drones were equipped with spraying mechanisms, allowing for targeted pesticide application in areas identified as high risk. While officials argued this was more precise than manual spraying, residents complained about being unexpectedly doused with chemicals while going about their daily lives. Building on the digital infrastructure developed during COVID-19, authorities implemented a comprehensive health monitoring system specifically for chikungunya. Citizens were required to download a special app that tracked their movements, monitored their proximity to confirmed cases, and required daily symptom reporting. Perhaps the most innovative aspect of China's response was the development of specialized mosquito-proof quarantine facilities. Confirmed chikungunya patients were isolated not just from other humans, but specifically from mosquitoes, preventing the insects from acquiring the virus and spreading it further. These facilities featured multiple layers of protection: sealed rooms with positive air pressure, fine mesh screens on all ventilation systems, and regular pesticide treatments. Patients were confined to beds surrounded by insecticide-treated nets and were not permitted to leave their rooms for any reason during the infectious period. The psychological impact of this isolation was severe. Patients reported feeling like laboratory specimens rather than individuals receiving medical care. The extreme nature of the measures inevitably generated significant public resistance. Social media platforms, despite heavy censorship, became forums for citizen complaints and dark humor about the situation. The phrase, "I don't know if the mosquitoes are gone, but it feels like we're the ones being wiped out," became viral, capturing public sentiment about the disproportionate response. The economic impact of the mosquito lockdown was substantial. Tourism to Guangdong province virtually ceased, with hotels reporting occupancy rates dropping to single digits. The manufacturing sector faced significant disruptions, with some international companies temporarily relocating operations to other provinces. Inevitably, comparisons were drawn to China's zero-COVID policy. Supporters argued that the early, aggressive response demonstrated lessons learned from the pandemic. Critics saw the mosquito lockdown as evidence that Chinese authorities had learned the wrong lessons from COVID-19, becoming overly reliant on authoritarian control measures. The Chinese response has set a new precedent for how governments might respond to vector-borne disease threats. However, the extreme nature of the measures raises questions about their replicability in democratic societies, with stronger protections for individual rights. Perhaps most critically, questions remain about the sustainability of such intensive interventions. The Chinese experiment in mosquito control, while successful in its immediate objectives, serves as both a model and a warning for how far governments might go in the name of public health protection. As the world continues to grapple with emerging infectious diseases, the balance between collective security and individual freedom remains one of the most challenging questions of our time.